Something is shifting quietly beneath the calm exterior. And if you've been picking up on it recently, it's not just in your head. A weighty final decision is slowly taking shape inside their heart, and in some curious way, you're woven deeply into it. From the outside, they might seem composed, withdrawn, or emotionally guarded, but a truth they once brushed aside has grown too heavy to keep denying or burying. This isn't simply about missing you. It's about what your bond awakened inside them and what it made them finally confront within. If you're feeling this internal shift right now, go ahead and like this and let me know you're here. They stand at a significant fork in the road, and every path their mind wanders down somehow circles back to you again and again. For a long while, they tried to drown it out with routine, work, ego, and emotional detachment, thinking silence would eventually dull what they feel. But some connections simply don't fade with time. Actually, the harder they tried to push it away, the more their inner self treated it as something unfinished and significant. Now they're looking back, questioning the narrative they'd been telling themselves just to stay in their comfort zone. Comment shifting if you have been sensing this deep inner change in them lately. Part of them feels drawn toward you with an almost unstoppable pull, while another part holds back because facing this truth demands honesty, openness, and letting go of old defenses that once kept them feeling secure. They're finally confronting themselves, wondering why your memory keeps resurfacing in the stillest moments, and why nobody else has managed to fill that same space. This is that heavy stretch right before clarity finally settles in, where the mind can only fight it for so long before the internal facade starts to crumble. If they return, it will be because they finally grasped that a bond like this doesn't come around often in a lifetime. And if they choose to leave, it will never mean you weren't enough in any way. Type yes if you want to understand what their silence truly represents and whether fear or truth is guiding them right now. It will only mean they weren't yet prepared for the depth of emotional honesty and personal transformation that loving you demanded of them. That's why your part right now isn't to pursue, not to force results, and not to control what unfolds next in this situation. Instead, let truth unfold naturally on its own schedule. Let time reveal what words could never quite capture before. What's happening inside them holds real emotional heaviness and depth. It isn't a fleeting doubt that vanishes overnight. It's a full internal struggle that keeps building quietly. On one side, there's an emotional pull toward you filled with memory, warmth, longing, and a strong sense of belonging that feels rare and meaningful. On the other side, there's an old, guarded voice shaped by past hurt, letdown, and fear of being emotionally wounded again. That voice urges them to stay defended, to keep their distance, and to protect themselves no matter what. These two inner forces are now clashing, and the pressure is growing harder to ignore as time goes on. They might hide within daily routines and distractions. They might fill their schedule with tasks. They might act as though none of this touches them anymore. But the more they suppress it, the more it surfaces within them. Because the real struggle was never coming from outside them. It has always lived within their own heart and mind. You became a pivotal moment in their life without either of you fully grasping it at the start, even if it wasn't understood at first. Something about this bond challenged the emotional barriers they'd built long ago just to get by. It reached a deeper part of them. The part that exists beneath control, beneath appearances, and beneath every protective habit they'd learned over the years. Now they're facing a decision they can no longer put off forever. They can stay within the identity they've always known, or they can step into an unfamiliar version of themselves. That newer version calls for courage, emotional openness, and vulnerability that feels strange and even uncomfortable to them right now. This inner tension is wearing them down from within. It shows up in the inconsistency. You may have noticed the back and forth behavior, the sudden closeness followed by distance, the moments where they seem ready and then pull back again without any explanation. This isn't always manipulation or deliberate confusion. Sometimes it's simply what happens when someone deeply wants a connection but also fears the change it requires. As this pressure builds, it starts dismantling old illusions they held about themselves and the situation. They can no longer tell themselves you were just a passing moment in their life. They're being pushed to see you more clearly, and even more importantly, to see themselves more honestly too. Old memories return with stronger emotional force. Shared feelings resurface in ways that feel heavier than before. Comment crossroads if you feel they are standing at a major turning point connected to you. Every silence now carries more meaning. Every absence holds more emotional weight. This discomfort is necessary because real decisions aren't formed through avoidance. They're formed when confusion begins to clear and fear no longer fully rules the heart. That clearing is already underway, even if it still looks quiet on the surface. There comes a point where uncertainty grows too heavy to bear, and they're slowly arriving at that point. Not because the outside world has shifted dramatically, but because the mind can't remain divided forever. For too long they tried to downplay their feelings, telling themselves it wasn't that serious, that it would pass, or that they could handle it without any real change. But something deeper within them now knows that isn't true anymore. And that awareness is what's pulling everything back to the surface with growing force. Feelings this deep don't just vanish. They grow in the quiet. They evolve even in absence. They wait until denial can no longer hold. Now those feelings come back in waves late at night, in quiet moments, and in unexpected memories that surface throughout the day. They're starting to notice how often their thoughts drift back to you without trying. How your presence feels like a soft background hum in their everyday life. How distractions no longer fully mask the sense that something meaningful is missing. Your absence has played a powerful part in this process. By stepping back, you left them alone with their own inner world, and that silence became a mirror they can't avoid. That mirror is revealing what they lost: the emotional comfort, the spark, and the sense of safety your presence once gave them. When they finally felt the true shape of that absence, they stopped wondering whether it mattered and started measuring the depth of what you shared against everything else around them. If you know you're not imagining this connection, share this with someone who needs to hear it too. Inside them, fear and desire have now collided at full force. On one side, there's a warm pull toward you, instinctive and emotional. On the other, there's a protective fear of losing control and reopening old wounds. Yet for the first time, desire is starting to speak louder than fear, stirring up an intense inner storm of hesitation and emotional conflict. They remain stuck in this space not because they don't care, but because they're moving through a deep internal battle, pushing them toward a breaking point. This is no longer just about a relationship. It's become a moment of identity, a decision about who they're becoming. While they may appear distant or unsettled on the outside, don't mistake this for emotional absence. They're realizing that staying in this in-between state, neither fully present nor fully gone, has drained their peace for far too long. They're now being pushed to take ownership of their feelings, even if it means releasing the comfort of their old emotional patterns and stepping into something that demands growth. Comment pull if you feel them still being drawn toward you even in silence. The hesitation that once served as protection has now become something like a prison. The walls they leaned on are beginning to crack under the weight of what they can no longer deny. They're remembering the moments they stayed quiet when they wanted to speak, and the times pride took the place of honesty when it shouldn't have. The gap between their emotions and their actions is shrinking naturally now, making change not just possible but inevitable. When someone is left alone with their own thoughts long enough, truth always rises above the noise of everyday life. That's what's happening now in their inner world. This isn't coming from outside pressure or external influence. It's coming from an internal shift growing stronger by the day. They can no longer hide behind uncertainty like before. Awakening. If this message is describing exactly what they're going through, the connection has become too present in their quietest moments. It keeps showing up when everything slows down around them. It returns when they try to focus on other things in life. And this repeated return is doing something important for their awareness. It's changing how they see the story of your connection over time. What once looked like random moments now feels like a meaningful pattern. What once felt confusing now feels full of purpose and depth. They're beginning to understand that they weren't simply missing a person in their life. They were missing the version of themselves that came alive around you, more open, more honest, and more emotionally connected than usual. And the ache of living far from that version of themselves has grown too strong to ignore any longer. This is a major turning point in their journey. So understand this clearly without doubt. When someone starts missing who they became with you, the question is no longer whether the connection mattered. The question becomes whether they're willing to return to the truth it revealed within them. As this awareness deepens, the outer world begins to lose some of its power to fully distract them. They can stay busy with many activities, surround themselves with people, or throw themselves into work, goals, plans, and constant noise. But beneath all of that activity, there's still one quiet current leading back to the same place. To you, to what was felt, and to what remains unfinished between you. This is the stage where the protective ego slowly starts losing its grip. The ego wants distance and control at any cost for safety. But the deeper part of them is starting to understand that complete disconnection carries its own kind of pain and emptiness. And sometimes that pain grows heavier than the fear of closeness and vulnerability. So now they're weighing two possible futures carefully. The safe life they know well, and its emotional emptiness, or the unknown path that carries risk but also the chance of something real and meaningful. For the first time, the possibility of truth is starting to feel more valuable than the protection they once clung to. That's where courage begins to grow inside. Not when fear disappears entirely, but when truth becomes more important than fear itself. And with that awareness comes a quiet stillness that settles the restless energy within them. The pressure is still there, but it feels different now, steadier, more focused and more honest than before. They're no longer resisting every feeling that surfaces inside. They're starting to let those feelings speak clearly. They're beginning to accept that what they feel is real, and that acceptance brings a quiet sense of peace to their heart, not because everything has been resolved, but because the inner conflict is slowly turning into inner clarity and direction. They're standing at the edge of an old version of their life, looking toward a new possibility that feels unfamiliar but real. And the only bridge between the two is a single honest choice they must make. This is the moment of transparency and self-reflection. The silence that once protected them is now reflecting them back to themselves with honesty. It's showing them where pride blocked love, where fear blocked truth, and where avoidance created distance that never needed to exist. They're revisiting conversations, memories, glances, and pauses from the past. But they're doing so with more maturity now, more awareness, and more emotional depth than before. They can see where fear was calling the shots in the past. They can also see the value of what was trying to grow between you naturally. This isn't only about regret or looking backward. It's about rearranging what truly matters in their life. The things they once placed above connection, such as image, control, safety, and emotional self-protection, are starting to feel hollow compared to the depth of something genuine and real. And something else is shifting in their heart as well. Empathy is growing within them steadily. They're beginning to feel what their distance may have felt like from your side. They're starting to understand the emotional weight you were carrying while they stood back in confusion. That understanding softens a person from the inside. It humbles them gently and makes it harder to hide behind emotional coldness. Because once responsibility enters the picture, everything changes in meaningful ways. They're no longer only reacting from fear alone. They're beginning to become the author of what they do next with greater awareness. And when someone reaches that stage, everything becomes more serious in a deep way. Not dramatic or loud, but quietly serious and thoughtful. Because now they understand that whatever happens next will reveal something true about the kind of person they choose to be. The final layers of hesitation are beginning to dissolve slowly. The old thoughts of should and could are losing their grip. In their place, something stronger is forming inside. Comment heavy. If the energy between you has felt unusually heavy lately, a sense of must is building inside them. Something that feels urgent. They must acknowledge what is real between you. They must face the consequences of what they feel deeply. They must stop wasting time in emotional paralysis that keeps them stuck. Time itself is starting to feel different to them now, more precious and less endless than before. They're realizing that staying stuck is also a choice, and often the most painful one in the long run. This clarity isn't only in their mind, but something they can feel physically in their chest. It shows up in the quiet pressure when they think about reaching out, speaking honestly, or doing something real. The unknown still unsettles them, yes, but the familiar emptiness of staying disconnected is beginning to unsettle them more. And that's why movement is drawing closer with each passing day. Words that were once held back are rising to the surface naturally. Actions that once felt impossible are becoming harder to avoid entirely. Because once truth grows this strong, silence stops feeling safe or comfortable. It starts feeling unbearable. You need to remember this important point always. Whatever they do next won't come from a random impulse or sudden thought. It will come from a long, difficult, and honest process of finally facing themselves without excuses or avoidance. That's why this moment matters so much in their life. It isn't a passing feeling that will fade away soon. It's a reckoning that changes a person deeply, slowly at first, and quietly at first, and then all at once when the time comes. At the center of everything is one undeniable truth that stands strong. You changed something within them in lasting ways. You reflected a part of their potential back to them clearly. You became a mirror, a catalyst, and a steady point in a time when they felt lost in uncertainty. Even in silence, your impact stayed present within them. That's why they're now reaching a deeper level of awareness than before. The noise is fading away gradually. The path is growing clearer with time. The question is no longer whether this affected them deeply, but when they will fully act on what they now understand inside. Layer by layer, their confusion is falling away, revealing a quiet and grounded certainty they can no longer ignore. They now realize that trying to control their feelings only made them stronger, and pretending not to know the truth is no longer an option. If you have been feeling this shift, trust your intuition completely. Something very real is reaching its final stage in their heart, forcing them to decide whether they're ready to live from truth instead of fear. Your role in this moment is simple. Stay centered, stay calm, and resist the urge to chase what is already being brought into awareness. Let them feel the full weight of your absence, the true value of your presence, and the real cost of pretending they feel less than they do. The person who once hesitated is approaching a line they can no longer keep crossing back and forth, like this. Comment which part hit you the deepest and subscribe to receive more messages about this unfolding process, because their inner conflict is turning into clarity step by step. Soon, one undeniable truth will rise above every excuse that came before it, revealing exactly who they are. When life finally demands courage and honesty, when that moment of clarity arrives, it will show that the silence before the truth was the most necessary part of the journey. If this message connected with what you have been sensing, hold on to it with hope. Trust the timing of this unfolding, because the next chapter of this connection feels much closer than it seems, right?